Call to order the City of Wyoming, November 19th, 2019 City Council meeting. Let the record show we have a quorum. Councilmember Yeager, Schilling, Zeros, and Mayor Iverson are present. Wyoming Councilmember and veteran Joe Zeros will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Paul, could you do me a favor? I think there's some people here to speak. Could you just grab the sheet? Thank you. All right. I'll read the open forum instructions. An opportunity for members of the public to address the City Council on items that are not on the current agenda. Items requiring council action may be deferred to staff or boards and commissions for research and future council agendas if appropriate. You will be limited to 3 minutes, and we ask that you conduct yourself in a professional, courteous manner and refrain from the use of profanity. Failure to abide by this policy may result in the loss of your privilege. If you're here to speak on something on the agenda, then when that time comes, you may raise your hand and we'll acknowledge you at that time. So do we have, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 names. So are you all wishing to speak on something that's not on the agenda? No? All right. We'll move on to approval of minutes. Consider approving the minutes of the work session meeting of the Wyoming, Minnesota City Council for November 5th, 2019. If there are no comments or questions, do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
We have a motion to approve by member Zeros. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second by member Schilling. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? So moved. Consider approving the minutes of the regular meeting of the Wyoming, Minnesota City Council for November 5th, 2019. If there are no comments or questions, do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
We have a motion to approve by member Schilling. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second by member Zeros. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So approved. We'll move on to number 3, which is the scheduled public hearing to consider Resolution 191187, a resolution ordering the project and for the 2020 street reconstruction project, city project number 20-01. Mr. Erickson, I think you're starting?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. As you may recall, we had worked diligently as a community here to develop a capital improvements plan, and this happens to be the next improvement project on our list. With that being said, we've had a number of informational meetings with property owners, 2 to be exact. We have submitted a feasibility study for council to review and accept, and this is the next phase in that process. Tonight we intend on holding that public hearing for the improvements, and we have a brief PowerPoint presentation that we'd like to go through. It's very similar to those that have been presented at the informational meetings and the council meeting where we had brought forward the feasibility study for the council to accept. But there's additional people here that weren't there for that information and want to go through that information one more time. So Jeff Pearson from WSB is here this evening as well. I want to make sure he's a constant face with this project as well, because there's a lot of public involvement, and there will be continue to be if we move forward into the design process. And there's a lot of property owners who want to make sure that we have people familiar with a couple of faces from WSB that are familiar with the project. So that we'll get rolling on the PowerPoint. Thanks, Jeff.
All right, thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the council. As Mark mentioned, my name is Jeff Pearson. I'm a senior project manager with WSB. I've been working on this project as we've gone through the feasibility stage, and thank you for having me here tonight. So I'll give the presentation is mostly just an overview. We get into some detail about what's proposed, and then in some of the assessment information as well. So the project location, these are 3 separate neighborhoods on the west side of Interstate 35. Primarily, the boundaries are Everton Circle or 264th Street on the north side, all the way down to 261st Street and 261st Lane on the south side. So there's 3 individual neighborhoods that come out in that area. And these are full reconstructions of the streets there. The utilities will stay with storm sewers included in the full reconstruction as well. For the project schedule, as Mark mentioned, since the council received the feasibility study and set the public hearing back in October, we did have a second public informational meeting. Gave an overview to the residents at that meeting, similar to tonight. But we did hear kind of two things that we wanted to bring back in this presentation. One concerned the regional ditch that the stormwater empties into, and we've included the maintenance, kind of the clearing of overgrowth and vegetation in that ditch, as well as some of the sedimentation, clearing that out. We've included that as part of the project, and there was a question from the public about should that be included in the accessible costs, or is that really more of a routine maintenance thing that should have been done over the years? So we'll touch on that item a little bit later. And then the other one was a question about, you'll see we have a separate option to do some park improvements. And there was a question from the public at that meeting about expanding the path from the park north to 264th Street. Through an easement along the ditch there. And so we just did a rough calculation of costs, just so you're kind of aware of that. So again, after tonight, if the council choose to order the project, we would be looking at approximately probably a late January approved plans and specifications, order ad for bid, so that we could stay on track for a March award of contract and construct in the spring through the summer into the fall. Then the final stage, as this is an assessed project, the assessment hearing would be after the project is complete, usually around November of the year after it's complete. Some background. Originally, the City Council authorized preparation of an engineering feasibility report in April of this year of 2019. We brought that report to the council on October 15th and presented that report. The streets in the area were originally constructed in the 70s, and they're in pretty rough shape due to the surface and subsurface deterioration. Really, the reconstruction rather than surface maintenance is really required. The subgrade is just deteriorated, and some of the things like a mill and overlay just wouldn't hold up. We've also identified a number of drainage issues that are an ongoing concern in the area. So we're looking to address those as part of the project. Just some quick pictures here as we talk about some of those pavement issues. You can see the deterioration of the pavement, the raveling of the asphalt, patches over the years, and on the lower right-hand side, that's actually a bituminous curb. I know it's hard to tell, it's kind of overgrown, but there's a bituminous curb there that's just not conveying water like it should. And as I mentioned, the drainage issues, you can see after rain falls, there's a considerable amount of standing water out there, and it just doesn't drain off. So the proposed improvements, as I mentioned, this will be a surface reconstruction. The bituminous pavement surface, we would also propose to add concrete curb and gutter. The road widths out there, if they are at or below 28 feet, we would propose to put them back in at their current width. If they are over 28 feet, the city standard width of 28 feet would be included. So the 261st lane, 261st Street, 262nd Street, and Emerald Avenue are all roads that exist out there greater than 28 feet that would be reduced to 28 feet in width. There's a replacement of, I think, 1 or 2 fire hydrants that we were directed by Public Works to include with the project, but again, that's not an accessible cost. That would be separate. When we talk about drainage, we'd really look to maximize the use of the existing public drainage facilities and primarily that regional ditch out there. We would expand existing swales and ditches as necessary, replace deficient storm sewer structures. The northernmost neighborhood and the southernmost neighborhood do have storm sewer structures and pipes today that are deficient. So we would look to replace those as well as add storm sewer in the middle neighborhood, 263rd. Replace culverts in the right-of-way that are still required. A number of driveways have culverts that are either crushed or heaving, and we would first look to see if it's possible to just remove them altogether. If it's not, we would replace those as part of the project. And then any additional storm sewer system construction as required. So we're expanding a little bit on the existing systems that are out there, not just replacing. And then, as I mentioned, that clearing of overgrowth and removal of sedimentation in the ditch is well past due, and we propose to include that as part of the project. This is that park improvement option. So one of the things we were asked to look at is the cost and the project to pave the parking lot at Lions Park. And then there's a trail that goes to the south from that play area down to Emerald Avenue to repave that trail and extend it. Right now it kind of ends at the park property line. Extend that up into the parking lot so that it would make a connection there through past the picnic shelter. The park improvements, it's listed as an option. It is not an accessible cost, and it would be funded separately from the street improvements. And then, as I mentioned at that public meeting, we did hear, some interest to extend the path north from 263rd all the way to 264th along the ditch. There's a public easement there. What we determined roughly that it would add about $50,000 to the park improvement cost. And so that would total now, if you added that pathway, it would be about $95,000 for just the park improvements option, if you included that path. Quickly, I know this is kind of hard to read, but in general, what that replacement road section would look like, we would excavate down into the subgrade, replace it with a granular bar, which is basically sand. That helps reduce the frost heaving that we see out there today, including an aggregate base on top of that, and then 2 layers of wearing course, bituminous asphalt wearing course, base course and wearing course. And so you'd have a good replacement section out there. We are proposing to add B418 curb and gutter, which the 4 stands for 4 inches. So it's your typical curb would be 6 inches tall. We would go down a 4-inch curb, and what that does is in areas where we have a lower amount of grade, it's flatter from the street up to the house. That just helps reduce the amount we have to make up, but it still conveys water considerably better than both the areas that have bituminous curb out there today and the areas that don't have any curb today, where we're seeing drainage issues. This is just a picture of kind of what that would look like. It's pretty straightforward, blacktop road with a curb on each side. So when we talk about project funding, 20% of the surface and drainage improvements, so the road reconstruction and then the storm sewer drainage improvements would be assessed. That assessment calculation is based on a unit cost rather than a front footage. So assessable units are based on the number of buildable lots based on current zoning. So in general, residential equals 1 unit. And then the city funds would pay the remaining project costs. Based on that unit method, working with the planner, we determined there's 113 accessible units in the project area. So the total estimated project cost is about $3.649 million. The total accessible surface and drainage improvement costs would be $3.585 million. And then you would take 20% of that to get to $717,000 divided by 113, and you get an estimated per unit assessment of $6,345 and change. Now, because of the comment about the drainage ditch clearing and is that really accessible, if it should have been maintenance over the years, we did run a calculation. If you took out the estimated cost of that clearing and sedimentation removal and when you take that out, it's around, new estimated assessment would be $6,297. So around $50 or so difference.
Jeff, what is the total then less? So how much is it going to cost? Maybe I need to ask Mr. Linwood. So if we take out that part to be assessed, what is the total that it's costing out of our funds?
The city component, Mr. Erickson, I think you said about 20,000, correct me if I'm wrong.
Are you referring to just the stormwater?
Yeah, just
the-
the one that's
just-
been in question.
So just shy of $30,000, between 25 and 30,000.
Thank you.
The assessment process, next slide there. The assessment process follows state statute, chapter 429. The written objection appeal must be presented in writing and signed by the property owner prior to or at the hearing, which again would be following the project. A notice of appeal must be filed within 30 days after adoption of the assessment, and then that interest rate is set at the time of assessment certification. Assessments are paid over a 15-year period, and the interest rate, as I said, was determined at the assessment. Past years varied between 4 to 5%. A couple payoff options: payoff in full to avoid the interest. 30 days after adoption, and then you could also, the default would be to apply directly to the property tax. We did present the public with at the last meeting with a example payback table. Again, this is just based off of an example 4.5% interest rate and assuming that estimated $6,345 assessment. I won't run through all the numbers, but we did present this at the public meeting. So neighborhood input, some of the things that we have asked for and have received some input over the last couple meetings and even between the meetings as we've talked to people. I mentioned drainage issues. That's certainly a big one. We've asked for if people have sump pump outlets, to tell us where they are and where they currently drain, because with the design of the roadway and including subsurface drainage, we can actually tie into their sump pumps if it works out for their where they're located. Obviously, we'd like to know if they have invisible fences or underground irrigation. The more of those things we can include in the plan and up front, the less issues we have during construction. So we provided a survey on the project website. If you go to the city website and then to the 2020 project website, that link will still be live. And basically, it's just a form where they can, the public can fill out, residents can fill out their address, and contact information, and some of these comments of these input. And it's certainly helpful for us. And finally, the next steps, again, kind of hard to read here, but basically where we're at, hold a public hearing, and then should the council order the improvements, we would begin immediately on the plan and specifications so that we can bid the project in late winter, early spring, and get going for construction in 2020. I'd certainly be happy to answer any questions.
Just really quick, do we have comment cards here tonight? There's a lot of people here tonight, so do we have any comment cards if they have questions?
I don't have any comment cards, but
We'd be happy to stick around after the meeting and take any questions and write council notes. Otherwise, there's the survey online as well.
Okay, great. All right, questions from council, and then we'll bring up the public hearing part. Do we need to go in, just point of order, do we need to go into a public hearing and then go out after that, or do we need to make a motion to do that?
The council discussion would be after.
After, perfect, all right. Okay, so actually we're gonna go to public comment, and right now, number one, I have John Bowers, if he'd like to come up.
We just have a motion to open the public
Oh,
hearing.
sorry.
Apologize.
Move to open the public hearing.
Who will second it?
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Thank you.
We're open.
We
you want me to?
Yeah, come on up, say your name and your address, please.
I am John Powers. I live at 4650 264th Street. I think you kind of covered in the topic, and I'll read up on it, but my property does not actually border any of the right-of-way of this project, so I was very surprised that I was being assessed by it. I'm assuming in there, you probably know, in there, I'm assuming in the state statute that it says that you can assess per user, I think is kind of how it's described, instead of by frontage. So I was just wondering if you guys could verify that, because I really, like I said, I was really surprised about that.
I can maybe help and address that as well here. So I know in our past practice and our past projects, our policy does allow for assessment of parcels that may not necessarily have frontage, but their only means of access is those public roadways. And so that's the scenario, I believe, with your parcel. Is that right?
Yeah.
So that is something that is allowable by statute, and also consistent with our policy and past practices with our other previous accessible projects. We've had this scenario occur in a number of other projects as well, and so it's not anything different than what we've done in the past.
Okay.
I know you probably don't like to hear that.
It's the
I
answer
apologize.
expected,
Yeah,
which is
but
fine.
okay.
And then, I don't know if you can go back to the map. Is it Everton? Is that being reconstructed?
Can you go back to that, Mr. Linwood?
Part of that is kind of the south part of Everton, and then from there going east on 264th. A portion of that is actually pretty new, and it might be a mill and overlay, which I know you're talking about the southern grade might be bad. So I was just wondering if you guys had looked at that. Yeah, that portion, and then going east between Everton and 264th Court. That portion is actually in pretty good shape, in my opinion.
Are you referring to the work that was done last fall when they did some of they did some of the smearing on those portions and sections? Is that what you're referring to?
To me, it looks like it was mill and overlay, not too long ago.
They have done a couple of areas, just maintenance-wise. We've had some experience with those in the past, and they typically last maybe 5 to 10 years. And when we come in and do this, we want to make sure we do it right and do it one time. And we're adding concrete curb and gutter as well. At least that's what was proposed. And so we don't intend on creating really a patchwork of, this has been done in this year, and then we have a piece that we're going to have to come back in a few years to reconstruct. And so we're trying to do this holistically, neighborhood by neighborhood. And so we understand that for the most part, the roadways are really in terrible condition. There are some segments that had some mill and overlays or some patchwork, as Mr. Linwood had indicated, to try to improve that, just to get us by to this point, because we knew that when we did some of those projects, we knew we weren't going to get to them in the next few years, and we knew we needed to hold the roadways together, and so there was a small investment there to just try to keep things together temporarily. But the subgrade out there from the soil borings that we've done is consistent throughout, and it's not great material to prevent roadways from freezing and thawing and heaving and things like that, where it causes that pavement movement and breakup.
Right.
So that's the train of thought and what we're proposing, what we're doing. But it's a very good question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
All right, then we have Warren.
I don't have a question.
Okay.
I thought we were supposed to sign in.
Okay, well, we're glad you did. We're happy you're here. Nancy.
I'm Nancy Leahy, and my address is 5025 261st Street. I am on the corner, so I am right at Kettle River and 261st. So my assessment, you're going to take it out to Kettle River as well, or just at the corner? Because since I am a corner lot.
I'm not sure I understand. The roadway improvement will go all the way out to Kettle.
So will I be assessed for Kettle River and 261st?
No.
No, you will not. So our assessment policy is you get assessed for the roadway that your driveway has access onto. And since your driveway comes out into 261st Street, you'll be assessed when that roadway is reconstructed. And that happens to be now. When Kettle River is reconstructed or improvements are made to that, only people that would have driveway access to that would pay an assessment.
Okay, all right, I was just concerned about that. Thank you.
A very
Great,
good question.
Thank you. Tony?
Yeah. I'm Tony Shaw, 480, 440
Is the assessment? The assessment rate is the same throughout the entire neighborhoods. Correct. Yeah, we're proposing to have curb and gutter on all of the roadways. We spoke before the meeting. I know that you're not thrilled with that, right?
Because I got away from curbs 23 years ago, and I'd like to keep it that way as possible. So I don't know how, the extra money that's coming out, the $6,200 that come out each person there, use that money and put it in the park instead.
So we haven't evaluated, if there's potential savings. We know that there would be, additional ditch work that would be required out there if we did remain with a rural section, because we know that there's drainage issues out there that we see, we hear about, we want to improve. And when we do that, a lot of the drainage problems are contributing factors to the condition of the roadway. And so we want to make sure that we address those. And so that portion of the roadway definitely just wouldn't be a mill and overlay or a reclamation type improvement. We want to make sure it's improved and drains and functions.
I understand the road and stuff, because it's patchwork.
Right.
Pretty much on a certain spring. One that comes, all of a sudden, it's coming up and patched up. I understand that going down the grade and everything else, I don't have to do that type of work. But that you can probably do, and probably last a lot longer, like you were gonna say, but really range and curves. I mean, just making it, the ditches, so you, water flow to nature, ditches, that ditch only goes to part of the neighborhood, doesn't go all the way, doesn't go all the way down to, 261st, it only goes right to 263rd, and just wraps around the full water all the way down to the Kettle Road, and keeps on going underneath the highway. So there's some,
Yeah. So I know we've had a number of public informational meetings, and I'm trying to recall, but I think there's some interest in curb on that roadway from some folks, and so I'm not saying that all. You're obviously one that does not. I know working with our public works staff, I'm not sure, Chuck, if you want to comment one way or another, if you have a preference or not. Maintenance-wise, I think we've had a project where we've done about 6 miles of roadways in 2015, and I'm not going to say that most of the areas do function okay, but there's certainly areas that don't function very well that we just weren't able to improve the areas as much as we would like, and we still have some drainage areas that likely are contributing to some neighborhood concerns with drainage, and ultimately, long-term, will have an impact potentially on the roadway. So I guess from an engineering standpoint, our preference is, curb and gutter. If there's impacts to property owners where they don't like that visually or what have you, we can certainly work around that and accommodate requests, but it's hard to know if that's a consistent request across the board. But I think from an engineering standpoint, it's cleaner, it handles water much more effectively and efficiently, and so our preference is that. But there's obviously many factors that we need to consider, such as this gentleman's concern. And so we need to take all those into consideration. So we'd be happy to address anything you'd like us to, but I think that's from an engineering perspective, that's what our preference is.
Okay, and correct me if I'm wrong, having that curb helps drain the water where it needs to go, correct? That's why we do it in certain places versus others as well. And I'm thinking on Goodview, there's some places where there's curb and there's places where there's not.
Yeah, so some areas we have curb on. Goodview is a good example where there's actually an embankment where it's higher, and we want to prevent erosion where water is channelized along the edge of the road and the soil that's there, and we have some erosion. There's other circumstances where we have curb, for instance, on some of the other roadways, they have asphalt curb and gutter, and we're proposing concrete because asphalt curb and gutter just doesn't carry water the way concrete does. It's not set to grade, it's poured with a paving machine, and it really has a difficult time carrying water with real flat grades. And so we're proposing concrete curb and gutter because it is relatively flat out there. It's set with a string line and grades, and it functions and works quite well. So we're proposing to change those bituminous curbs to concrete. We can make both work. It's just our preference, and I think it's a little bit cleaner and functions a lot better and works long-term with less maintenance.
Okay.
So.
All right. Thank you, Tony, for coming in. We appreciate it. Roger?
I actually thought we had a sign in.
Oh, all right. Well, we know who you are, so that's good, right? Welcome. All right. Does anybody else wish to come up and speak? No? All right. Then we will make a motion to close the public hearing. Do you have a motion to close the public hearing? Okay, so moved by Member Schilling. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Member Zuras. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are now closed, and we can ask any questions that council may have to staff.
I have a few.
All right?
On the ditch and the difference between, so it's a $48 decrease if we don't do the ditch.
On the assessments.
On the assessments, what's the 25 to 30,000?
That would be the total that's being switched out of an assessable cost. So again, if you took 20% of that 25 to 30, it would equal that $48 or so.
Okay, so that's basically if we were to reduce the assessment and not for the ditch, then the city would have to pay the 25 to 30.
100% of it, yeah.
Right, okay. The other question on that subject I had was when the gentleman, according to our minutes, when the gentleman came in, he asked why this was being tacked on to the assessed cost rather than handled under maintenance. If someone could refresh my memory, maybe I missed it when he asked last week, but I think his question was why is it going to be?
And I can maybe try to help address that. The system that he's referring to, some of it is the local drainage that's a part of the neighborhood drainage system that conveys the water. And so, just similarly to the storm sewer that's within the project, we're removing, replacing, upgrading that, and that's an assessable cost. We have ditches that are going to be regraded along the roadways that are accessible, that we're going to be, trying to make those work and function and grade and drain better like we do with all of our projects, and those are accessible. This is very similar. It's a little bit more off-road though. It's still, the water is conveyed through storm sewer pipes, discharges. There's a couple locations. One is the main channel, right, that conveys water. There's also some rear yard drainage with a little bit lesser of a channel that we're just going to remove the brush, remove the sediment that is collected in it from years of sediment on the roadway, within the ditches, erosion, things of that nature. And so really there's an argument that it's very similar to the work that we've done on all of our projects where we've cleaned roadside ditches, we've cleaned or improved culverts or things of that nature. This happens to be an open ditch. So there's an argument for that. There's also an argument that maybe this falls more under the general maintenance, public works type of things, which we're not necessarily equipped to handle. We have not necessarily all the large equipment that can go back in and remove sediment and remove some of the trees and things that are prevalent there. I think we're going to try to work to maintain that a little bit more diligently in the future with at least clearing a lot of the vegetation that grows. But some of the sediment and things that have been there for a really long time are beyond the means of the equipment and staff time that we have for it. And so I think there's an argument both ways. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, I understand there's an argument both ways. So in order to justify the assessment, the increased assessment, we are saying that we are basically upgrading the drainage system, especially pertaining to that ditch.
Correct.
And that upgrade is a accessible cost. Okay.
Correct.
But I also think that we have a discussion whether we want to keep that in that assessment or if we take that out. So
Right.
My question to that is, can we go ahead and approve the project? Do we need to have that discussion and final answer tonight, or can we go ahead and approve the project and then have more of a discussion about that?
I think, and I'll defer to the attorney, but I'll give my opinion first.
Okay.
My opinion is if you want to go that option and move forward with options, I think you would move forward with the option that is the more expensive option, leaving it included. If you can always back out and not have people complain that the assessment cost is proposed to go down. I'll leave it at
Sure.
that. So I'll leave it at that, and I'll
Okay.
defer to the attorney.
Okay,
Mayor and council members, I would agree, and typically, I think what the, council or engineer would prefer would just see those costs to go down at the assessment hearing stage as opposed to going up. So from that, the best thing to do would be to go ahead with the entire project and then consider it at the assessment stage.
okay,
Okay.
that makes sense.
Then in follow-up question, if we were to take it out, the 25 to 30,000 would be an increase in our bond?
That would not be the case, because if it's not assessed, we can't bond for that. We can, we have to
Well-
assess 20% of the bonded amount. So that would need to come from our surface water management fund. And Mr. Linwood, I don't know if we have that number available to us this evening, not likely, but we can certainly verify those things and make sure that we're
Okay.
adequately covered with our bonding for the project.
Which we can do as we have further discussion.
Correct.
We could
Right.
evaluate if that can be a bonded cost or if we could utilize our surface water management.
Okay.
Okay, then the other question I had, if the parking lot's only 45,000 to pave, why is it 50,000 to pave the trail?
It's a good question, but in reality, that's actually a considerable amount of square feet. The distance from that parking lot all the way up to the 264th, when you take the square foot, we made the assumption that it was an 8-foot trail. We could go narrower or wider or whatever. That square footage is nearly the same or perhaps a little bigger than the parking lot itself.
I may add as well that the parking lot is sufficiently graded and has asphalt. It's simply paving the existing surface, where the trail is also adding the Class 5 aggregate base and the bituminous. So I think there's a little difference along with what Mr. Pearson had indicated. That's a component to that as well.
Do we have to decide on the park improvements tonight also?
We do not. I think that's something that, in speaking with Mr. Linwood, I think you guys have some things going on potentially with Swenson Park and need to work through some of those things before we know whether or not this is a good idea. And so we can certainly move forward with the final design if you're inclined to move forward with the project. And we'll leave that aside. If we want to add that at a later date, we certainly can. It's not accessible. It doesn't need to go through all these public hearing components, but we can add that as a non-accessible component at a later date. So we'll just move forward with design and just add that at a later date if you're inclined. And so I think we need to have some further discussions on the overall park fund and what that means with the Swenson Park and grant potentials and things of that nature, and incorporate this potentially at a later date.
And the park board should be included.
They should be
The park
included in,
advisory
they should
commission
have
should be.
an ability to comment on it, right,
Right.
and give a recommendation to
Yep.
city council, correct?
Okay, that's all I had.
All right, Member Schilling?
I think we pretty much covered everything, but I do like the idea of leaving the trail at a later date as well.
Okay,
But I am in favor of that ditch improvement staying on this as an accessible, so.
okay, Member Zeros?
I guess all the questions have been asked that I had in my mind and that I wanted to ask for, but I agree with Dennis. I think that we should leave that ditch in there
For now,
for now.
Yeah.
and then
Yeah,
for now,
correct.
let's not,
Yeah, no,
let's
I
not worry the residents
leave it
that
till
we
we
made
have
that
final
decision.
numbers,
Correct.
final assessment and go
Correct.
from there.
All right,
That's
does that work, Mr. Erickson? Yeah, that does, okay. All right, so let's just make that straight. We're gonna keep it in there, but we do have the opportunity to lower that, right? So, need be. Okay, all right, if there are no further questions, do we have we need to approve resolution 191187, a resolution ordering the project and for the 2020 street reconstruction project, city project number 20-01. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Motion to approve by member Schilling. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second by member Zeros. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So approved. We hope everybody will stay if you'd like to. There's always more fun to come. So otherwise, thanks for coming tonight. So, all right. We're going to go to the consent agenda 4 and 5. Anyone wish to pull an item on the consent agenda for further discussion?
Pull number 5, please.
Okay, we'll pull number 5, or is there any others? All right, if not, we need a motion to approve number 4, resolution 191188. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Motion to approve by member Zeros. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by member Schilling. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, number 5, member Yeager.
On the third page, under rapid printing, professional services, almost $485 for lip balm.
It was lip balm. It was for our min-car conference. We had lip balm, and then we also had inclusionary in that. We had giveaway mints that we have, and we'll be able to utilize those for multiple events. We had a significant number of both of those that we utilize for that min-car event. That's our EDA authorizes up to
Oh, so that's
$500.
just putting our name on a tube of lip balm?
Correct. It has the City of
Okay.
Wyoming logo on it.
It
Correct.
just seemed a little-
Sure. No, you're correct. It was
It's good lip balm.
Yeah, it was for that event. It was something that we had.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
How many tubes of that did you get?
300 tubes.
Okay.
Yeah. And then we got mint
Yeah, I was gonna
covers
say the
too. We
mint
have
covers.
covers for the mints and the mints as well.
And I will add to that, they were very popular.
The
It
lip
got
balms
into a
and
lot
the
of
mints were,
hands.
yeah. I think that time of year that was a good that brought people up to our booth.
All right, are there any questions for number 5?
That was it.
All right,
Move to approve the bills.
do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second by member Schilling, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, so approved. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11 are reports from officer boards and commissions. Does anybody wish to pull a report for further discussion? If not, we'll go ahead and move on to new business, number 12, to consider resolution 191189, a resolution approving the transfer of funds from the general fund to the fire department CIP and capital revolving fund. Mr. Linwood or Chief Hoppy?
I'll start with this one, Madam Mayor. Mayor, members of the council, this item that's before you right now is a resolution approving that transfer of funds from our general fund. The City of Wyoming has a general fund to reserve policy of a minimum of 55%. In 2018, the City Council authorized the creation of a capital revolving fund to provide for future funding of capital expenditures. Usually what we do to make sure that we maintain that general fund balance is we would roll in any excess from the previous year, 2018 in this case, and put it into that capital revolving fund. As Mr. Hoppy will comment on the next agenda item, the public safety has been trying to receive FEMA funding through a grant for our SCBAs, or self-contained breathing apparatuses, for our fire department, and they've been unsuccessful in that grant for multiple years now. So they will need to purchase new units before the end of the year. So what we're asking council here would be to transfer $250,000 into that CIP fund 830 into that fire department out of that general fund. And then secondly, staff is requesting that the city council authorize the transfer of $950,000 from the general fund 101 to that capital revolving fund to make sure that we maintain that general fund reserve balance policy of 55%. With that, I'll stand for any questions.
Okay, Mr. Linwood, can we just have a little discussion about the revolving fund? What I don't want residents to think is that we are over budgeting.
Sure.
To make sure we put money in that. So,
Sure.
this last year, we budgeted so close to 2%, 3%?
Right, our actual expenditures were quite close. When the city or any city does its budget, we for the anticipated revenues, we budget quite conservatively, and we exceeded those revenues quite extensively this year, largely due to our building department and to the filling of a position here at our city hall that wasn't filled for the duration of the year. So that was some of the reasons for that excess fund balance. That's often a common thing, that you have some sort of excess fund. Obviously, we don't want to underfund our operations, but just those those revenues that came in were significant. So we would just be taking that excess, and that would be going to that revolving fund. More of a long-term picture, the council authorized that long-term plan that we continue to work on, and we'll really be able to evaluate that fund and that capital revolving fund, how we want to. I know council had talked about, could we look at the future of trying to look at that capital revolving fund, whether it be for streets, for facility improvements, et cetera. So there's quite a large duration of capital items that revolving fund can be used for, whether it's equipment, which we've used that before for fire, and then we're using our public works for a plow truck right now that we're paying it back. So there's quite many different avenues for that.
And that means that we don't have to bond for something, we don't have to pay interest on something. That's an internal loan that we use to make sure that it's better for the residents.
Correct.
Excellent.
That's this council's one time used it just as a straight out purchase, and other times we're correct. We use it as that inter-fund loan, and then we avoid having charge that interest. We could charge that interest to ourselves, but we have not opted for that. Just a way for the efficiency of those larger purchases.
Okay. More questions from council?
Can I have one?
Member Yeager?
So you want to transfer $950,000 into Fund 409, which currently is about at 1.3 million, correct? Is it possible that we could maybe reduce that, transfer 500,000 or some portion of it to the street fund, and then get some mill and overlays done in cash? Because on our pavement management plan, you know, the half-life of a street is a mill and overlay project. So I'm sure we must have some streets eligible for one.
So Member
Sure.
Yeager, I do believe that as we've had that discussion for council when we've had our work sessions, and I believe we're still working through that, if I remember those conversations correctly, right? We're still working on that.
I
so-
was told we could do it, or we could just put it in the capital revolving fund and do it later. I'm just asking, while we're talking roads, why not do it upfront now?
Well,
You
because
still
there's-
have 450,000, which is a substantial chunk of change to put in your capital revolving fund anyway.
Correct, but we have been working on that as a group. Mr. Limwood, did you want to add to that?
And I
I
think,
thought we were
you know,
still-
council has the ability to obviously do that. They can transfer the money however they see fit. I think the thought, I think on this was to move that for now into that revolving loan, as we talked about a little bit during one of our budgeting work sessions, is Mr. Erickson was going to be compiling some of those projects that would be good candidates for mill and overlays. And I think that's something are going to give that information to Abduak and Myers as they compute that long-range plan and exactly what kind of funding options and what would be necessary. So it could be that you'll be looking at, just because you put it in that capital revolving loan at the moment, that you may look to take a component out for streets, you may take it out for other items that we have upcoming and have to deal with. So I guess it would be my recommendation that we wait until we get that long-term plan report back, until Mr. Erickson provides those capital improvements to them, and then at that point in time, we can see, at that point in time, the council is certainly welcome if they want to use a portion of that towards street improvements, they certainly can.
Actually, I always thought we should dedicate some for streets because our 600,000 is all tied up in bond payments. And our assessment policy doesn't include mill and overlays. So,
we're currently on number 12, resolution 191189, transferring the funds. Do you have any other questions regarding that?
no,
Okay. Do we have any other questions from council?
No, Madam Mayor, I do not.
No? All right. So we need a motion to approve resolution 191189, a resolution approving the transfer of funds from the general fund to the fire department CIP and capital revolving fund. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Motion to approve by member Zeros. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second by member Schilling. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So approved. Number 13, to consider resolution 191190, a resolution purchasing SCBA units from Municipal Emergency Services in the amount of $237,222.90. Chief Hoppy, are you gonna let us know what that is? And
Absolutely, Madam Mayor and City Council. As we've been discussing over the last about 4 years, anticipating the replacement of our SCBA, which is the devices that the self-contained breathing apparatus our firefighters use when putting out fires or dealing with hazmat materials, essentially a life support system that they are required to have in order to engage in those type of services. We identified it, several years ago, and we made 3 attempts with the assistance of professional grant writers to try and obtain funding through a FEMA grant. And unfortunately, we just weren't successful after 3 tries, and we weren't funded. But we had anticipated this and set funds aside accordingly in anticipation whether we did not get the FEMA grant to support this. So where we are today is our SCBA are at end of life, which means that we can only use those tanks and service them for a breathing apparatus for 15 years. And once they hit that 15-year mark, DOT will not recertify those tanks and that equipment, therefore we cannot use them. And without the SCBA, our firefighters cannot go into fires, address fire hazmat issues, so we would be essentially shutting down our fire services. So it's that essential of a product that we have to replace. We really have no options. And so in the process, we tasked the fire department. Initially, we were anticipating a $300,000 expenditure to replace this. I tasked the fire chiefs in the fire department to look at several vendors and evaluate them what we would need, quantities, what would be best used, fit, and compatible with our current air filling station, and to come back with a recommendation. They did a fantastic job. We were anticipating a $300,000 expenditure. They actually brought it in at $237,222.90. We looked at 3 separate vendors in the process. One vendor came in about $1,000 less than what we're proposing. However, they didn't have the options that we're requesting available to us, and it would have required some modifications to our filling station. So even though the initial base bid was slightly less than what our vendors that we chose, they weren't the least most responsible bidder because they couldn't provide us with the options. So what we're looking at doing is purchasing 36 backpack units, which will be sufficient to supply our staff, and then a couple extra units built in there in case we have one that goes down, we can replace it as it gets paired. It'll include the full backpacks, 72 air tank bottles, which means 2 bottles per pack, so that when we do send firefighters in, they'll burn through that first air pack tank. They come back out, they refresh, they load in a second tank, so they're ready for a second evolution into the fire. So it may seem like a lot of tanks, but they go through a lot of air. So if it's a long event, they're going to need multiple tanks. That's why we order that quantity. We also looked at 3 RIT packs. So a RIT pack is a rapid intervention pack, and that's designed so that if we do have a firefighter that goes down in a fire, we have a RIT pack ready to go and a crew that will quickly, rapidly deploy into the fire and try to recover our downed firefighters. So we have 3 units there so that we can supply each of our engines with a RIT pack, so that regardless of what engine we set out at one event, we have a RIT pack already on that piece of apparatus, so we're not trying to move that equipment from apparatus to apparatus before we deploy. Therefore, it keeps our response times down low. And the final option that we chose with this were thermal imaging cameras, which 15 years ago, they were large devices, and today we can actually get them built into the masks. So we're going to get 6 thermal imaging cameras built into 6 of the masks, and those are going to be one for each of our team leads, and that gives them the opportunity to see the hot spots and the flare-ups while they're in the fire, rather than having to hold the device up. They actually get a heads-up display in their mask, which is a really a great advance in safety equipment for firefighters and awareness and alertness. So what we're proposing today is the expenditure and authorization to purchase and replace our SCBA for our firefighters at the cost of $237,000, or $237,222.90.
Okay. Questions from council?
I have none.
I have one.
Okay,
So a couple years ago, I was gonna run into that burning building.
you were.
Is that the apparatus that we're talking about?
So the SCBA is the tank. I mean, we see it iconically on television
Yeah.
and movies. It's the air pack that goes on their backpack. It's like a backpack with an air tank, and the mask that goes on their face and supplies them with the breathable oxygen when they're either inside a fire or dealing with hazmat situations. So it's required for all of our firefighters that are inside what we call the collapse zone, which is the danger zone on any type of event that they be respond to.
And then the infrared, if one of our firefighters, God forbid, is in that fire, lost, can find that firefighter, correct?
So the infrared, the heads-up display infrared, it really identifies hot spots within a fire. So it's going to show you where the hot spot is, maybe inside a wall that we haven't got out yet. But if we do have a downed firefighter who's on the ground, it will also help identify that outline, or basically the hot spot image of where they're at inside that fire. Because you got to think, when they're in there, that's sometimes complete darkness. Working in thick smoke with a flashlight only penetrates so much, but thermal imaging actually sees through the smoke. It sees through the wall, and it really gives them a lot more information to be able to effectively put the fire, but also get those down firefighters quicker.
And they would also have that armor radio system as well on them, correct?
All of our firefighters will have an armor radio on them in case they do get in trouble. They can call for help. So that is also part of the safety program that we have in place.
I just have one other question.
Yeah.
How many years are those units going to be good for?
15 years, and that's mandated by the Department of Transportation in their certification. So each year, we have to have those air tanks pressure tested, you know, and make them, and they have to pass the compliance check to ensure that they're sufficient to maintain breathable air, you know, and so they have to be inspected. But DOT will not certify them past 15 years, and that's why we are today. So I would anticipate a life cycle of 15 years on these too, unless DOT changes their laws.
Okay, thank you.
And I would assume that we're gonna keep budgeting then, we're gonna, you know, so we don't get hit with it all of a sudden in 15 years, which has been our practice.
Correct. I think in the past, you know, we haven't really forecasted budgeted in the past, and I think that's part of what we're looking at as, you know, departments and a city is that long-term plan and that CIP planning that, you know, we're working on and being able to anticipate some of these larger expenditures and pre-budget for them, you know, forecast budgeting, which is, you know, when we talk about the capital improvement fund and how that all fits into it, for sure we are absolutely moving forward with forecast budgeting because we think it's more responsible financially to the city and the residents.
Okay, thank you. Member Yeager?
Mayor mentioned there's an armor radio inside those units.
The armor radio isn't in the units, but all of our staff do have armor radios with them when
Okay.
they go in.
The question I had, I was at the county board meeting last night.
Correct.
What happens if, in the worst case, negotiations fall through and there's no armor radio?
So I don't think we should be discussing negotiations at this time because we're still working on that.
I know, but it's, since
Yeah,
we brought it up, what happens if, on the worst case scenario? How do these units need to adapt to it, or?
SCBA is independent of the 800
Okay.
megahertz radio system, so it's two different conversations.
Okay, I
Both
was
of them
wondering
are,
when it was, since it was brought up.
so both of them
I
are,
asked.
both of them would fall within the safety equipment for our firefighters or first responders. The 800 megahertz is their ability to communicate from internally to externally, which is our command staff that manage the fire scenes, so that we improve that incident command awareness or any issues that we may have internally, either with our firefighters, their safety, or how the fire operations is going. So that is, the 800 megahertz is for sure part of our safety equipment that we rely on to
Yeah.
ensure the safety of our firefighters.
Yeah, it's
If
just,
there-
yeah, because it was, you know.
If
Yep.
there are no further questions, Member Schilling, do you have a question?
I just have a comment. I just want to say good job to the staff. I mean, we budgeted this for 3 years. We came in substantially under the budgeted amount, so thank you for the hard work on that. And it looks like we're going to truly solve everything we needed on this, and then obviously we'll go forward with our long-term planning. So I think it's very smart.
Fire Chief?
Just to kind of follow up on the life cycle on these, the NFPA standards, they rewrite those every 4 to 5 years. So the ones we currently have are 2 to 3 standards past, you know, what is current. So that is something else that needs to be taken into account when you factor in the life cycle on these, is they do change the standards every, like I said, about every 5 years. So just like a quick example, the ones we have, the alarm systems go off on these when we reach 25% of air left in our tanks. The current standard now is 33%. So, you know, those are the sort of changes that we also have to look into when we factor in the life cycle. And this is what the NFPA is coming out with for changes.
So when the fire chief refers to 33 or 20%, that's the amount of air that's left in your tank, and they've changed the standard to give our firefighters a little bit more time and awareness that they're about to run out of air. So in the event they need to get out, to get a little bit more lead time to get out of the fire before they lose the possibility or lose the availability to air. Right?
All right, if there are no further questions, we need a motion to approve Resolution 191190, a resolution purchasing SCBA units from Municipal Emergency Services in the amount of $237,222.90. Do we have a motion to approve? I will make that a motion. So do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Member Zeros. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So approved. Number 14, to consider Resolution 191191, a resolution purchasing pumps from Minnesota Pump Works in the amount of $6,636. Mr. Amjad, I'm assuming you're gonna take this one.
Yes, ma'am. Honorable Mayor and City Council members, Public Works contracts annual inspections of our lift stations, and these inspections give us information for budgeting for the next budget cycle. So the 29 inspections revealed that 4 of our pumps have bad motor windings, and they were budgeted for 2020. Unfortunately, one of the pumps failed just recently. The city has been rebuilding lift station pumps, and this process does not include rewinding the electric motors. The cost to rebuild the pumps has been $49.50, and then they install a loaner pump when they take our pump away for $625. So that brings the total to $5,575 to rebuild a pump without new electric motor windings. Then a new pump from the manufacturer costs $6,636 installed. So with a difference of $1,061, Public Works feels it'd be justified to install a new pump that would last 10 to 15 years without any major repairs. So staff recommendation would be to purchase a new pump from Minnesota Pump at a price of $6,632. At this time, you got any questions I could answer?
Is there warranties on the new one?
1 year, ma'am, so.
1 year, okay, and that's complete. If something fails in that 1 year, it's complete, they replace the whole thing?
Everything except wear, they're called wear rings and stuff, where them pillars run, that's what they're made to do, wear out.
Okay,
Yeah,
and
so-
do we check them on a weekly, monthly, yearly
Annually,
basis?
annually on
we
the
check them.
wear rings, yes.
Okay, so we have a policy in place that we take care of that and,
Yes,
right?
yep, and it's an outside contractor.
okay, perfect. Further questions?
None.
No, if there are no more questions, we need a motion to approve Resolution 191191, a resolution purchasing pumps from Minnesota Pump Works in the amount of $6,636. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Member Schilling, do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Member Zeros, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, so moved. Number 15, to consider Resolution 191192, a resolution certifying the unpaid utility bills and city services invoices of certain residents and businesses contained on the attached list to property taxes for collection in 2020. That was a mouthful.
It is.
All right, Mr. Lindmark.
Yes, Mayor and members of the council, this is an annual exercise for the city council. In early October, staff sends out, receives a list of unpaid utility bills or any kind of other delinquent accounts that we have out for the year. That is compiled, and then those individuals are sent letters giving them a due date to pay those off, or they will go before the city council for tax collection and assessment. What you have before you now is you received a list in your packet originally on Friday. Since then, we have accumulated all the different payments we received over the weekend, the last couple of days. So now you have an updated spreadsheet in front of you, and that's what we would be asking the city council tonight to approve that resolution to put those towards taxes. So
Okay,
that'll stand for any
and
questions.
just for audience purposes, right now that totals $91,780.75, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and we figure pretty much people can still pay them, correct, up at City Hall?
You can, we'll have this one approved by the city council, and we'll be taking payments through the end of the week. So that was our intent, but after that, the county asked that we have these in by December 1st. So we would be sending that immediately next week before the Thanksgiving holiday, obviously.
Okay, and then how do you notice residents, because I have my own septic.
Sure.
So how do you notice
The-
them and the process with that?
Sure, what happens is our staff, we have a third party that does our actual billing statement, so we contact them and we receive a list to our internal staff, and they, it's an Excel spreadsheet, and from that we create letters to all the individuals, and from that, those letters are mailed off with those amounts that are delinquent and the amounts necessary to pay, so they will not come before the city council to be assessed. So that's essentially the process. That's for our utility bills or any other unpaid balances, whether it may be situations where we have outstanding balances with a developer. So maybe we had to come in place, we had to mow someone's grass, so things like that.
Okay, and if the residents have any questions, obviously they can come up or they can call.
Absolutely,
And
yep.
ask whatever.
Yep, they
questions
can call,
have.
right, they can call City Hall, they can stop in, anything, if they have questions on their accounts, absolutely. We're able to go through that and give them the information on those amounts on those billings.
Okay, perfect. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Sure.
Member Yeager?
Over the years, it seems that the amount that we have delinquent keeps increasing. Is there any way of trying to get that number down so that we don't have to certify so much?
You know, I think this is pretty much a normal exercise in any city. You know, we have given different options. I think the council has approved as far as we now give individuals, residents, and business the ability to pay online. You can send up for ACH, which is the automatic deduction from your account. You can come to City Hall. We now accept credit cards at City Hall. So I think some of those have hopefully helped with residents. We still plan on pushing out more to sign up for ACH or electronic payments. I know this year, as Mayor Iverson said, we're approximately 91,000. 2018, we're approximately 114. The year before that, we're about 120. So we are down a little bit this year.
Okay.
So hopefully that is some of those different options. But I think sometimes this is just a bill that, and not quite, I don't want to speak for residents, but when some came in to pay, they just said, just something that I kind of forget about, gets away from me, and they come in and they pay it. And I know other individuals that we've talked to say, I let it roll every year. I like to handle it that way. And I don't think that's a large component, but that is definitely some.
Well, and we also have more residents in the city too. We've had more developments, so that
There
could also.
are some more accounts on
Right.
the system now. That's correct.
Any further questions?
I just had one question. So once the assessment is certified, then they would have to deal with the county for that?
Correct. At that
It's
point in
payable
time,
on your
it'll-
taxes, I understand that, but if they wanted to do that ahead of tax payment, they can.
Correct.
deal
After
with
that,
it.
after that December 1 day, once we send it, then they would have to make any kind of changes that have to be directly dealt with the county. And if the county, I'm not sure if they would give any give that individual any ability to pay that off before it was actually certified under the taxes. That'd be a question probably for the
Okay.
auditor.
All right, thanks, Rob.
You're
All right.
welcome.
Any other questions? All right, I'm not gonna read the whole thing. So,
Fair enough.
we need a motion to approve resolution 191192, certifying non-paid utility bills. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
So moved by member Zeros. Do we have a second?
Second?
Second by member Schilling. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So approved. Number 16 on our agenda, to consider resolution 191193, a resolution approving payment voucher number 1 final to North Valley Inc. for the 2019 street improvement project, WSB project 013654-000, city project 19-01, in the amount of $495,574.71. Mr. Erickson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. As stated, the 2019 street improvement project consisted of Fairview Avenue and Fairview Boulevard. The contractor has successfully completed that work. We've worked closely with the contractor to develop pay voucher number 1 in the amount of $495,574.71. It is under contract, so we're pleased with the results of that. We have also worked with the contractor to acquire the lien waivers, the consent of surety to final payment, IC 134s, and of course the 2-year warranty bond, which will start once you accept the improvements, hopefully this evening. So staff is recommending approval of resolution accepting improvements and making payment to North Valley in the amount of $495,574.71. So I'll stand for any questions that you have.
Just to be clear, we are not striping that road. It has not been striped, we are not striping it, correct? 'Cause
Correct.
I get asked that question quite a bit.
Correct.
Okay, so
Yep.
no striping on the road to Fairview.
It wasn't striped previously. It's not striped now. If there's a change and a desire in the future, we can always evaluate that, but it's not intended to be.
Perfect.
Yep.
All right, any further questions?
I am.
Just a comment, they did a great job, really looks good.
It's really nice to drive on it now, right?
It is.
Especially when you're not feeling well. Nice and smooth, right? All right, I won't read this all as well, but we need a motion to approve resolution 191193, approving the payment pay voucher number 1 final for the Fairview project. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
We have a motion to approve by member Zeros. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by member Schilling. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. Number 17 on our agenda, to review and discuss the request for proposals received for the building upgrades to Wyoming City Hall. Mr. Linwood.
Yes, Mayor, members of the council. At the October 1st city council meeting, it was authorized by the council to put out a request for proposals from architectural firms for some different components here at City Hall. First and foremost was the American Disability ADA upgrades for the front door entrance and then the bathrooms for accessibility purposes. Some security upgrades for the front counter in City Hall and the council dais. And then the replacement and addition of a rooftop air conditioner. The one rooftop air conditioner is nearing its useful life. And then the addition of one, the old unit is undersized and often doesn't effectively cool the building just because it's too small. And lastly, an approximate 900 square feet addition on the north side of the building for extra office space and has improved security measures and accessibility throughout the building. Firms that were selected, they had to provide different components that was architectural, structural, mechanical, electrical, furnishings, and landscape architecturing. The city would utilize our civil engineering firm WSB for this. We received 4 submissions from architects for this work. At this point in time, staff went through, tried to evaluate some of those different proposals that we had seen. At the end of the day, the city council has the final say on what firm that we would like to potentially utilize for this work if the city council authorized to do so. We received four proposals. I said one from Wold Architecture, Winseth Smith and Knowlting, Buteo, and New Studio Architecture. As staff evaluated those, there's if council took a look at those over the weekend, you can see that there's some differences in the work that they've completed, differences in how they would perform the scope, and exactly what would be inclusionary within those proposals. With that being said, and then staff evaluating those, we think it would be pertinent that we would bring in all 4 different architects for interviews with the city council. So that would be my recommendation, but obviously that's open to conversation with the city council tonight. I know that we are nearing the end of the year. I know that we would probably want to discuss too potentially dates when maybe that would work too if the city council so desired to move forward on those interviews.
Okay, questions from council?
There sure is a difference in the charges from these people. I'm looking at the bottom line.
Yeah.
Jumps from anywhere from 18 or 19,000 to 57,000 for the same services.
And I think that's when we, as staff and council, I think instead of staff trying to identify how they came up with those costs, I think it would be best served coming from the actual architects to say what scope of services they plan on making inclusionary through that, and I think that would be best with council and then perhaps myself and maybe the building official being here to ask those questions and evaluate those proposals with just some verbal interviews.
Okay, Member Schilling?
Well, that was one of the things that I had as a person that does building maintenance and is in charge of a rather large budget item where I currently work. I have a lot of questions on what was presented to us. One of these was extremely vague in my opinion, and that's the one that's obviously the lesser of the 2 evils, or the 4 evils, I should say. So I do have some questions because when I read through them, there are things that I feel that are missing and I would like addressed. So that's my concern. So I agree with obviously bringing them in. So.
Okay, Member Yeager?
As I look through the 4 of them, 2 of them, I don't know if I'd even want to bring in, because new studio, as we discussed, as mentioned previously, they seem very light on municipal. They seem to have brought in another firm in order to give them, boost their municipal capabilities. And this last one, Winseth, Smith, and Knowlting, just seemed way too vague. The other ones you might wish to bring in because they both seem to have municipal experience, ADA experience, and especially Wald with a needs study experience. That said, I would possibly vote no on this simply because the proposals all include that addition. And while I have no problems with the ADA stuff and the HVAC, I do have concerns about the additions. And I mostly have concerns that because we never did a needs study to find out what we really needed on this. 2017, it was just presented, we're going to put an addition on.
Okay, Member Yeager, we are right now discussing the request for proposals. So that is the topic right now.
Okay, it's my understanding that I'm allowed to say what my concerns are.
You are, but we're on topic.
With the proposals.
With the proposals, correct.
Then my concern is include an addition that I'm not convinced that we truly need.
Okay, and we can discuss that at our work session as well. So, all right.
I'd like to add one thing. Again, to your point with the differences, I just got done with a bid opening, a sealed bid opening, And we had for police remodel for our facility, and the differences were almost 500,000 from top to bottom. And they had the same scope of work, same generals, but I do know that I have a lot of experience with Wold. I've done 5 projects with them over the last 5 years. They're extremely efficient, and to be honest with you, I've never had a problem with them. And they do take care of everything, and they do lighten the load up on staff, and it does give you a peace of mind just to be aware of that. So that's my experience with them.
Well, and I looked at Winston Smith and Nolte, and I was kind of impressed that they already had a concept plan based on discussion. So I thought that
Where was
was,
it?
that was really kind of nice
Oh, that.
to see that, so. All right.
I saw that too.
Okay, so I think what we need to know is, do we want to set up interviews, correct?
Correct. I know that we would obviously have to have council check schedules. We've had some preliminary discussions with those architects. I know with the holiday season here at the end of the month with Thanksgiving, but I know one date that would work with the architects, since it's a matter of council would be open to it, would be Monday, November 25th. So that would be a date that they potentially could, if council was so inclined to have all 4, they would all be available that day.
Okay. I have that date open, do you?
I am open.
What is that, the 20?
It's the 25th.
Next Monday, the 25th.
5:30? Is that what we're thinking?
You could go if you wanted to. You could do it a bit earlier if
Like
you'd like.
5
Yeah,
or-
I think it'd be pertinent to have at least a half an hour per client to
So
let
this
them
is gonna
introduce
be,
themselves.
this will go later. I mean, I'm open that day, but I would prefer either doing it, well, you guys gotta work, or doing it later because, I mean, quite frankly, I'd like to get a civilized dinner in.
But we do
Up
have
to-
to be respectful to the people coming in as well, which I understand. So, do we, it will go pretty late if we start after 6. What time do you do dinner, Linda?
Actually, these days about 7, but for you, I can come in at 6.
Should we do a 6 and try to end around that, maybe 8:30, that will give them half an hour, 40 minutes of
7.
firm?
Yeah.
Okay.
Would that be appropriate?
Okay.
It's Monday.
Next Monday it is. Oh,
We
wait,
don't need to make a
haven't-
motion on it, do we?
Please do make a motion,
motion.
and I guess discussion that you do want all 4 firms
So go ahead
inclusionary.
and-
Make the motion for 6 to 8:30 time slot for the 4 firms to come in so we can ask questions.
On
Thank you.
Monday, November 25th.
Yep,
Here at
correct.
City Hall.
here at City Hall.
Thank you.
All right. Do we have a motion to approve? You made that motion, I need a second.
Second.
Second by member Zeros. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
All right, so that did pass. Number 18, to consider the resignation of Francis Duckinson from the deputy city clerk position effective December 6th, 2019. Mr. Linwood?
Yes, Mayor, Council, our current deputy clerk, Frances Duncanson, has submitted her notice to resign employment with the City of Wyoming effective December 6, 2019. Fran will be heading back to work in a municipality in Wisconsin, a little bit closer to home, but Fran brought a great deal of expertise and professionalism to our city, and she will be missed.
Yeah, I'd like to thank her for her hard work and her service here at Wyoming, and it was a short time, but I understand that drive can be very long. I understand that. So any other questions?
None.
All right, so then we accept her resignation.
Just a
Move
motion.
to accept
to approve it?
move to accept Fran's resignation with regret.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by member Schilling, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Sad to see her go. Number 18, last on the agenda, to consider the December 17th, 2019 Wyoming City Council meeting. Mr. Linwood?
Mayor, members of the council, this is an item that I wanted to have some discussion on tonight. We had some inquiry on this, and we are seeing some municipalities that they try not to have a second meeting in December with different holiday activities. Right now, the staff if we did this, staff would need to be notified so we could try to make sure that we take care of business that's necessary on that December 3rd. It's not to say necessarily that we wouldn't still need that December 17th. Obviously, there are things that we always do, payment of bills, things like that. Sometimes our liquor licensing, depending upon that, can fall on that second meeting as well, and those annual permits is necessary before the end of the year. So we would be working on those as well. It's like I said, if we did need it, we could do it, but I just wanted to get some feedback from the council if that would be something that you would be interested in. What you see some municipalities do is they could authorize a resolution that you could have myself, the city administrator, pay bills on that necessary bills to the end of the year, but it wouldn't be anything that exceeds our purchase policy. Like example, nothing over 5,000. That would go ahead and I would pay those, and then those bills would be put on that first meeting in January for council review, is the way that we could handle that potentially. But I just wanted to have a little bit of discussion and feedback on that tonight. So if we did want to proceed with that, like I said, we could take those proper steps at that December 3rd meeting and get a feel if that's something council's interested in.
Mr. Linwood, would this help kind of package everything up by the end of the year so we start fresh in 2020? I mean, that's kind of...
Some of the municipalities that do that, they say it is a nice time to get extra work done to try to head into that year and then try to accommodate some of those schedules within the holiday season. And then that some of their board, the city council actually prefers it. Now, like I said, every community is different, obviously, so that's why we're having this discussion tonight to see if it's something that the council would be interested. But it would take some extra effort on that 3rd. We'd probably have a fairly large agenda on that 3rd, and I've made our department heads aware that this could be a potential possibility, so we would be working towards that if necessary. So.
Okay, and then if there was something on the bills that council had a question on or issue with, then the first meeting in January, as we look at that, we would then be able to...
Right, we would have it, so council would still have to approve those at that first meeting. It would just give the authorization to put them forward to make sure that we made any due dates or deadlines, et cetera. So, and if we had something that could not wait until next year, obviously, yes, we would proceed
We'd have to meet.
with a meeting, correct.
Okay, questions?
How many days before a meeting do you have to advertise?
If we did a special, it's just 48 hours, I believe. Correct?
Mayor, council members, special meeting would be 3 days of posted notice. And the mailing's going out to anyone who's requested those. I don't think this would be considered a special meeting. This would just be the removal of a regular meeting from your agenda.
Yeah, I think this is a really bad idea. In the past, the second meeting in December, what historically was for passing the expenditures budget, allowing council to consider what they heard at the Truth and Taxation meeting, which is at the first meeting in December, and then reflect on it and then pass the levy. Now, granted, we have not done that in a number of years, but it was always a nice thing to do. Also, if there was, for some reason, a need to continue the Truth and Taxation, that would be the meeting to go to. That would be the meeting you would have it.
That's correct.
Also, with the amount of special meetings that we like to call and work sessions, I can't, if we're calling work sessions like we just called one on Monday, I can't see losing a special council meeting a regular council meeting rather, because there's work to be done.
Okay. Member Schilling?
What meeting did we call on Monday? Did I miss something?
No, that was the one for the architects.
Oh.
That's
The
what we're
the work session.
It's to
The work
interview some
session.
people.
Yeah,
Well, you
it's
voted
a-
no, you're all right.
Yeah,
so.
you
Just
voted
no
correct.
to ask questions to an architectural firm.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm fine with it. I think we can handle it on the 3rd. I think we can get everything in
Right.
order. If
And
we
it-
need to call something,
If we
we
needed
can.
it, that would be something that we would
Yeah,
discuss at the
I
end
don't
of the
have a
meeting on the
problem.
3rd. So if we did have to continue our truth and taxation, we could do so on the 17th.
Correct.
If there was outstanding items that staff felt that the council had to see before the end of the year, we would proceed. So this was, I guess, just to get some feedback, and then we can discuss it even further on the 3rd and have it. And then last
I
agenda
have
item.
no problem if we have to continue something to call the meeting, but if we don't, I have no problem not having the meeting.
As I say, I've been on council 5 years, and I don't think we've had to extend. In
I
that
think
5 years, I don't think.
I think it's
but-
happened once, and
In 2015.
I was gonna say, I think it happened one time, but I think other than that, it's been, it does happen though. It's not to say it can't happen, so I
Right.
mean,
That was
there are
once in-
cases for it.
Yeah.
Once
but-
in 15 years that I've been here.
But again. we
Actually,
can
I
call
looked
that
it
meeting.
up. It was once in December 2014, and then another time in 2011.
But we do reserve the right to call a meeting if we.
Right,
Correct.
that's my
Yeah,
point.
that's the point, right?
If we
Okay.
have to, absolutely.
That's
Right.
why I asked the question, how many days we have to notify in advance?
No.
We
I'm in
have
favor.
plenty of favor of it?
Okay, so
I'm in favor.
Okay.
we'll bring it back at the December 3rd for more discussion on it, probably one of our last agenda
Okay,
items.
so we don't need to move on this at all?
We don't need to move on, just wanted some
Okay.
feedback from council. tonight.
Perfect. Okay, from there, we're gonna go to, council reports. Member Zeros, Member Schilling, are you guys,
He'll handle sewer.
okay, so. you
He's
know,
great at it.
We'll start with Member Yeager, and then we'll go to Member Zeros and Member Schilling, so.
Okay. As I mentioned before, I went to the last night's county commissioner's special meeting on the Armor radio agreement. I thought it was extraordinarily interesting. And then Saturday, I went to the Watershed District listening session that was held at the library. And that's my report. Thank you all for coming.
All right, Member Zeros.
Okay, at 3 o'clock yesterday afternoon, I attended the sewer commission budget meeting at Lindstrom City Hall. We learned there will be no increase in treatment rates for 2020 budget. I think I've mentioned that before, but it's pretty finalized now. We scheduled a special budget meeting for December the 12th, as a final number should be ready to bring to the whole board on December the 16th for approval for the 2020 budget. I also attended the sewer commission meeting at 5:30 yesterday. Mark Nelson said that cold weather dropped the temperatures in the SPR tanks much sooner than it has in the past. So he's been making adjustments to the controls to help offset the changes. It's because the cooler water temps will bring Mark problems with some of these chemicals they put in there. Anyway, Mark also said that there was an issue with one of the influence slide gates. Problem was in the controls of the valve, which has since been repaired. And the sewer commission board approved the resolution authorizing submittal of a loan application to the Minnesota Public Facilities Authority for a loan for the Clean Water Revolving Fund for the corridor lift station improvements. And the loan amount is estimated to be $792,000. This is for the project that will be done next summer, 2020.
You gonna add to that, and then I've got something to say.
I'm not gonna add to that.
All right.
Mr. Zerwas did a great job.
Member Zeros, how long have you been on that committee?
12, 14 years, something like that.
Good job. I don't think I could do that job like you're doing, so you're doing a great job with that. Mr. Linwood, can I just, really quick, that's part of our water and sewer bill and all that kind of stuff, right? Because we have this joint sewer commission and all that kind of
Correct.
stuff, right?
When we did our rate study, right, we get numbers or kind of, as right now, as Mr. Zerwas said, is that the Joint Sewer Commission is going for that grant application. That was something that was factored in. Those capital improvements were factored into the city's rates because we obviously have a 23% share in any of those improvements, and then just our normal billing that we receive from that sewer commission. So correct, they're tied right together.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, I attended the EDA meeting. The discussion was focused on how to attract new businesses, reaching out to them with an email and or a letter, and with a brief introduction to our city, and then we'd follow up with a letter after that. I also attended and spoke at the special Chisago County Board meeting regarding the ongoing negotiations on the Armor radio system. We hope to have a tentative agreement soon. That same night, after the board meeting, I also attended the Highway 8 Task Force meeting. The task force plans on holding another community engagement meeting early January so residents can see the progress being made on the Highway 8 project. We have not received funding on that yet, but we're constantly working on getting funding to approve Highway 8. Last but not least, tomorrow, Wednesday, November 20th, the Planning Commission is holding their community engagement open house at 5:30 here at City Hall. They will be presenting several ideas at different stations for discussion on how we can better serve our residents, and we are hoping for a great turnout. So with that, thanks everybody for coming, and do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Yeah.
Do you want to second
I didn't make a
that?
report.
Oh, you want, what?
I didn't make a report.
Would you like one?
Sure.
Well, go right ahead.
Oh,
sorry.
Go for it.
I attended the EDA meeting on November 6th, which was moved because Veterans Day was Monday, the 11th. I also attended the Sewer Commission meeting yesterday and tonight, and thank everybody for coming. I appreciate the input. So
I just butted right in there, didn't I?
that's all right.
Yeah, that's right. All right, so now we need a motion to adjourn.
Okay, move to adjourn.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We are adjourned. Thank you for coming.
I know, I'm like, the EDA meeting was in there somewhere. I'm like, I was here.
Sorry about